Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Mona Khalif, and I am one of your facilitators today for the Disability Justice Series. All of us facilitators will be introducing ourselves soon. First, let's go ahead and start by ensuring accessibility. ASL interpretation and live captioning are available for today. To access ASL interpretation, we have spotlighted the video screen marked ASL Amber. We will also spotlight these slides in each facilitator's screen while they are presenting. For example, right now, I am spotlighted. You can undo the spotlights for yourself at any time by clicking on the three dots by the spotlight screen and select Stop Spotlight. Tony will provide us a live captioning today. For captioning, click on the two C's on the lower taskbar, then click Enable. Let us know in the chat if you need any access support. If chat is not accessible to you, feel free to unmute yourself and let us know. Also, for accessibility purposes, people should always say their first name before speaking. We'll also be describing images on the slides and more generally, what the videos will show as well. Okay, I think we're ready. Let's start recording today's session. Thank you. Welcome everyone to the first 5 planned workshop on disability justice. Again, my name is Mona Khalif. These 5 workshops are made especially for the Minnesota State community. Today is the first of 5 sessions that we will offer every month through May. Our title slide shows 3 photos of activists participating in disability rights rallies. The title is Disability Justice, Why It's Everybody's Business. Today, we'll explain what disability justice means by grounding it in shared definitions and in the context of disability history. Today's goal is that we can all learn enough to take individual and collective action towards disability justice. But first, we have a few housekeeping slides about Zoom's basic tools so that everybody knows how to join activities we have planned. After that, we will pause to center our learning by offering a land acknowledgement and commitment to action statement. Let's go over the Zoom tools. It's usually located at the bottom of your screen. On the far left is an icon of a microphone for muting and unmuting yourself. We ask that everyone stay muted unless you need to speak, please. Next is the video camera icon, which we hope you turn on for breakout discussions and if you need to speak in a larger group. Turning on your video if you speak allows the ASL interpretation. In the middle is the chat icon. If chat is accessible for you, please use it to comment or ask a question. On the far right is the reaction button. It is where you can share an emotion with an icon or raise your hand. We might not respond to your hand right away, and this is only because we have much to cover today. Thank you for your understanding. First thing we would like everyone to do is to click on the participant button to change your name. This participant button is often in the middle left-hand side of the toolbar. We hope everyone can rename yourself to indicate your preferred name and optionally your pronouns. To rename yourself, click on the top 3 dots above your own camera, picture, and choose rename. Another way to rename yourself is by finding your name after clicking on the participant icon and click on the box rename. After you enter your edits, click OK If you have preferred pronouns, then enter them, please. Now let's move on to center our work today with the Minnesota State Land Acknowledgement and Commitment to Action Statement. Minnesota State acknowledges the land and tribal nations upon whose land this work is being accomplished. We acknowledge that we are on Dakota land. We recognize the native nations of this region who have called this place home over thousands of years, including the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Lakota, Nakota, Ho-Chunk, and Cheyenne. We acknowledge the ongoing colonialism and the legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that foreground the formation of Minnesota state colleges and universities. We commit to advancing critical efforts to understand and address these legacies, including the larger conversation of reparation, repatriation, and redress urgently needed for the scope of ethical acknowledgement to begin in earnest. Lastly, we affirm our commitment to address systemic racism, ableism, and all other inequalities and forms of oppression to ensure inclusive communities. Let's now introduce our instructors who will help cover the next 5 disability justice workshops. We will not be teaching at all of them, but let's all of us introduce ourselves today. We all work at the Institute on Community Integration, or ICI, at the University of Minnesota. ICI is one of the nation's university centers of excellence on developmental disabilities. Each state has at least one center, and ICI is Minnesota's. As I said earlier, I am Muna. My pronouns is she, her, and I am an education specialist at ICI. I am passionate about racial, social justice, fighting against all forms of oppression. And now I will pass it to my colleague, Rebecca.
Thanks, Muna. Hi, everybody. I'm Rebecca Dosh Brown. My pronouns are either she, hers, or they, theirs. I'm passionate about drinking coffee and tea, writing poems, and teaching people about disability justice. I identify as a disabled person, and I'm the parent of an autistic young man named Tayo. All right, pass to Katrina.
Hi, everybody. My name is Katrina Simons, and I am passionate about inequity and disability justice. I mean, making it go away, not having it there. And I am happy to be here today, but I won't be teaching, so you won't see me that much. And I will pass it to Jana, if she's back.
Yes, I am here. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Jana Ferguson, and I'm also an education specialist at ICI. I'm passionate about working with educators to help re-engage students with school and with learning, as well as supporting animal rescues and animal rights. I'll turn it back to Rebecca.
Okay, everyone. That's our facilitation team for the next 5 sessions. Thanks, everyone and team for facilitating with me. I'd also like to give a shout out and a sincere thanks to the most awesome Minnesota State 8-person equity committee who made this workshop series possible. I want to especially thank committee members Brock Bailing, Oana Zayek, and Teresa Edelman for giving me such helpful and thoughtful feedback on the content, and to the students of Minnesota State who contributed to this series. Thank you. Now back to you, Muna.
Thank you, Rebecca. Now it's your turn, everyone. Please put in chat your name, your campus affiliation, and one thing you love to do or feel passionate about. If chat is not accessible, feel free to unmute and say your name first and campus affiliation and one thing you love to do. Thank you so much for sharing. All are welcome today. During our time together, please listen to your body and take breaks and move your body as needed. Okay, we are ready to formally kick off the Disability Justice Series for this large and beautiful community. All of you belong to the largest network that is educating our future leaders from Minnesota. Thank you all for all you do. We're excited to have this time together because disability justice is everybody's business. Disability justice is social justice. We believe you cannot seek justice for any one group without understanding disability justice as well. We realize that for some of you, today might be the first time you have heard of disability justice, or the first time to hear about ableism, or the first time to learn about disability history. For others here, it just might be it might be your life's passion, like all of us. Everybody is welcome today. Wherever you are on your learning journey, we hope you both learn and share with others today. The learning objectives for today are: know what disability justice is and how common it is. Know what ableism is and how to recognize it. Know disability history and think of how it intersects with histories of race, gender, and class. Know some strategies to unlearn about ableism. At the very end, we will share dates for the 4 sessions that we will dive deeper into what we covered today. All sessions will be interactive with breakouts. That said, today is a little more listening because we aim to set a shared understanding and context for the work we all need to do more of around disability justice. Today, you'll notice we will use different words when talking about disability. We may say, for example, people with disabilities or disabled people. We'll say people, and we'll say people without disabilities or non-disabled people. There is at times preferred language in certain disability communities, such as in the autistic community or the deaf and hard of hearing community. In an upcoming session we offer on March 30th, we'll talk about how to talk about disability. For now, we'll just note that disabled people choose different ways to describe their own disabilities and communities, and we will try to honor that. That said, there are some pretty common words society is still using that are out of date, stigmatizing, and even harmful to people with disabilities striving for disability justice. And again, we will address that fully on March 30th. Our overall advice for today, excuse me, is you must use a disability label for anyone. If you must use a disability label for anyone, ask that person what they prefer and then honor it. And it's okay to ask. What is disability? According to the Americans with Disability Act, or ADA, a disability is when a person has a physical or mental impairment that limits one or more major life activities, has a history or record of an impairment such as cancer in remission, or is perceived by others as having such an impairment. It is important to note that in the third bullet, that you are protected by the ADA when someone thinks you have a disability, even if you do not have one. We will talk more about this when we talk about the history and more in February 23rd session. We will cover the intersection of race and disability and other identities like gender. That workshop will explain in details why the ADA had to include protections for people with perceived disabilities. Disability under the ADA law means you have limits in one or more major life activities. Of course, challenges also come from social barriers. Major life activities are things most of us do every day, including our own internal and automatic processes. They are actions such as eating, sleeping, speaking, breathing. Movement, walking, standing, lifting, bending, running. Cognitive function, thinking, concentrating, processing speech. Sensory function, seeing, hearing, touching, and balancing. Tasks, working, reading, learning, cooking, socializing. Bodily function, how your organs function, like blood circulation and digestion. If any of the above applies to you, we welcome you to the disability community. And now I'll pass it to Jenna. Thank you.
Thank you, Muna. This is Jana speaking. There are so many kinds of disabilities. ADA does not list them all, but it does cover them all. But they have to fit in the earlier definition that we shared. Some disabilities are visible and obvious, while others are not visible or not obvious. So it is very important to always believe someone when they tell you they have a disability. Types of disability can be chronic illness, like cancer, diabetes, and now people who are in long-term recovery from COVID-19. Cognitive or intellectual, like Down syndrome and fetal alcohol spectrum. Developmental, like autism, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, ADHD. Mobility, like multiple sclerosis or MS. Remember that mobility disabilities, like most disabilities, can vary day to day and over time. Learning, such as dyslexia, which is the most common learning disability, but auditory and speech processing delays are also common. Accident-induced, including disabilities like a traumatic brain injury or TBI, a loss of a limb, or a spinal cord injury. Sensory, disabilities such as deaf and hard of hearing and blind or low vision. Mental health, like depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. And recovery from addiction. For addiction, the ADA law protects individuals seeking addiction recovery treatment from being discriminated against in the workplace. This means that your employer can't fire you based on a decision to seek addiction treatment. Disabled people make the largest minority or the largest minoritized group in the world. 1.2 billion people are estimated to have disabilities, or 15% of the world's population. The graphic on this slide from the CDC is titled Disability Impacts All of Us. It shows that 61 million adults in the US have at least one disability. Another way to say that is 26%, or over 1 in 4 adults, has at least one disability in the United States. In addition, over 50% of Americans will be diagnosed with a mental illness or mental health disorder in their lifetime. Lastly, if you reach the age of 70, then you will have an 80% chance of having a disability before you die. In Minnesota, 1 in 5 adults, or 22% of the adult population, have a disability. That is 959,140 Minnesota adults. Lastly, let's look quickly at the numbers of college students with disabilities. 19% of US undergraduates and 11% of US graduate students have a disability. 4%, or 13,600 of the 340,000 students at Minnesota State have been identified with a disability, which seems quite low compared to the national rates. The low percentage could possibly mean that students with disabilities are not registering formally with disability services. Overall, disabled people typically represent 15 to 20% of any general population. Since 1990, under the ADA, disabled people in the US have legal rights to reasonable accommodations and adaptations. So addressing barriers is not just a nice thing to do, it's the law. Barriers to access can be physical, sensory, attitudinal, or systemic. Examples are physical, like the lack of an elevator, sensory, like the lack of ASL interpretation, attitudinal, such as when disabled people are treated like children, as objects of pity, or as less valuable than others. Such attitudes may lead to social isolation, bullying, and high rates of abuse of people with disabilities. And systemic. These are deeply embedded barriers in our systems that most of us do not question or know about. For example, disabled people must live in deep poverty to qualify for any kind of government support. Their earnings are capped, and if they go over, they lose these services. Many are forced to live in group homes and nursing homes at very high rates due to the lack of accessible housing. Disabled people face the highest rates of police violence, imprisonment, and some of the highest rates of victimization in crimes. Lastly, today in the US, only 35% of disabled people are employed compared to 75% of non-disabled people. Let's remember that it was just in 1990 that rights guaranteed under ADA to the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's very recent history and happened late compared to other civil rights legislation. Okay, that's enough of the basic facts and definitions. Let's now slow down the process and process what we heard in breakouts. We'll have breakouts for 11 minutes in groups of about 5 to 6. While Amanda gets us ready for the first breakout, let's set some grounding assumptions. First, be present, however that works for you. If possible, turn on your camera for the breakouts. Ensure that everyone shares and holds space together, so no one person should dominate the time. Speak from your own lived experience. Everyone is learning today. Each journey looks different. Address troubling statements by focusing on the words, not the speaker. For example, if someone said the phrase special needs kids, and I find special needs as problematic, I might say, instead of special needs kids, I prefer to say students with disabilities, because disability is a natural part of being human. By saying disability, we can be clearer and help destigmatize disability. Muna, can you please paste the 2 questions into the chat? The questions to discuss in your breakouts are, number 1, disability is often excluded completely or just mentioned as a part of a long list and not discussed when people are talking about equity and social justice work, or even about diversity. Why do you think that this omission happens so often? Secondly, is the word ableism new to you? Whether yes or no, explain what you think the word means. We have set it up so that you must choose which room you join. Please choose to enter a room with only 4 to 6 people at the most, so we spread across the rooms equally and everyone's voice can be heard. Anyone wanting ASL interpretation or live captioning, please choose to enter breakout room number 1. If you don't choose a room, just know that Amanda will start randomly assigning you to breakout rooms after about 1 minute. Breakout is for 11 minutes. We'll give you a broadcast notification when 1 minute remains. When you return from breakouts, we will ask one person from your group to summarize your discussion by typing in the chat. So please designate a reporter before returning. Amanda, we are now ready for our breakout groups. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. We hope you had some good discussions about the frequent exclusion of disability in social justice work, and that everyone shared ideas about what ableism means to them. If you're the reporter of your group, please put a chat in 1 to 2 sentence summary of what your group said. We'll give every group representative the chance to type a brief summary in the chat. One group shared that many disabilities are invisible and people might be too polite and don't ask. They're not organized enough for good advocacy. It can be hard to get data. Lack of knowledge about disabilities in general, and then how to talk about it. Technology has given people with disabilities more access to advocacy and voice, but there are still barriers, stigmas, and the feeling to be delicate with people with disabilities. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing from that group 11. Another group stated that our theory is that disability is left out of the discussion because we are still deeply enmeshed in a medical model that sees disability as a problem that needs to be solved instead of a culture and an identity. Thank you very much for that statement as well. Another group shared, our group remarked on how DEI, or diversity, equity, inclusion, work is often siloed, and historically, that this work has fallen into a compliance space which prevents integration and advancement of disability topics. Absolutely, thank you. And I'll just read one more. You're welcome to read more in the chat, but in the interest of time, I'll just read from this last group. Disabilities are often hidden, and yet when disabled people inform someone else of their disability, they then have to answer questions like, "You don't look disabled, are you sure?" Lots of really additional great comments there. So thank you everyone for your deep, meaningful conversations and for sharing out with the group. We'll allow those chats to keep coming in so you can continue to read those. But now let's turn to the next slide for a definition of ableism by the disability justice advocate, Lydia X.Z. Brown. For today, we adapted their words slightly to fit our talk. We show a picture of Lydia Brown on the slide. They are wearing black-rimmed glasses. They have short black hair with some dark green color mixed in. They present and identify as Asian American. Ableism, according to Lydia, is number 1, oppression, prejudice, stereotyping, or discrimination against disabled people on the basis of actual or perceived disability. Number 2, a way of thinking and doing that systematically acts as if some people's abilities, bodies, and minds are less valuable, less worthy, and less desirable than others. Like all isms, ableism causes ongoing prejudice, segregation, discrimination, systemic bias, and societal oppression, and emotional and physical harm, as well as high rates of violence and trauma. Ableism is deeply woven into all of our systems and institutions. It includes commonly accepted and unquestioned attitudes and assumptions about people with actual and perceived disabilities. Rebecca will now provide everyone with many examples of ableism.
Yes, thanks, Jana. Rebecca speaking here. Do I ever have a list of examples of ableism? I'll first give credit that a few examples and some of the language were adapted from a much longer poem by Maria Palacios, which we linked at the end of the slideshow under resources. But I also added examples I felt were missing in her poem, such as examples of ableism faced by people who have less visible disabilities, such as mental health disabilities, intellectual disabilities, or neurodevelopmental disabilities like autism and ADHD. I added these examples since society too often equates disability discrimination and disability itself only with people with physical disabilities. As you listen as you might listen to song lyrics, except this is not a fun song and it's all about ableism. Notice if any examples feel less obvious to you than others. Some are so deeply embedded in how society operates that most of us don't question them. And finally, when I say the word you, I don't mean you as an individual per se. By you, I mean society in general. And when I say I, that's not necessarily me, but it means disabled people in general. Okay, it's a long list of ableist examples that'll take about 5 minutes. So hang in there and let's listen. You assume I will never marry, can't have children, or be a good parent. You say I do not seem disabled, and you mean that as a compliment. You say I'm attractive, even though I have a disability. You push my wheelchair or pet my service dog without asking permission. You use a baby voice when you speak to me. You set low or zero expectations for me. You react to my accommodation request as if it's a burden for you and not my legal right. You tell others I'm cheating or lazy when I ask for an adapted lesson. You tell your children to stop staring at me and you pull them away from me. You enjoy films where I'm shown as a monster, a villain, an object of pity, or as a joke to laugh at. You use words in everyday conversations like crazy, idiot, and stupid. You call the police since I'm acting funny by pacing back and forth outside a library. You, as the police officer, shoot to kill me after I don't react to your demands immediately. You think I am not worth befriending or dating. You sit silently while others bully me about how I look, move, or talk. You think I don't belong in college because I think or act too differently from you. You see me as a problem or as a distraction for you and the other students. You give praise and extra attention to students who memorize exactly what you said. You reward people with a full scholarship, even if they might mistreat or bully other people daily. You assume because of my skin color or my accent that I can't be as smart as you are. You say, if I make over $1,350 a month, you'll cancel my access to disability services. You say, if I get married, my spouse's income counts toward my income limit to access services, and you'll cancel my services. You legally pay me 50 cents an hour to work a job where everyone else gets minimum wage. In fact, you get tax relief for hiring and paying me sub-minimum wages. You feel sorry for me. You say you'd rather die than be like me. You're always trying to heal me or fix me, even when I tell you I like how I am. You can't imagine why I might love myself, my body, and my brain just as it is. Okay, everyone, we're going to let you think and have some time to reflect. If you wish, feel free to type your reflection in chat, but now we're headed into a short break.
This is Jana speaking again. And thank you all very much for all of the comments that you made in chat. Rebecca, everyone was expressing how powerful some of those words were, wishing we could give some of those thumbs up and likes to some of those statements. So again, thank you for sharing that with us, Rebecca. Allow us to now give you about 300 years of disability history in just a few slides. It's a big challenge, but today we are choosing to emphasize the history of people with intellectual disabilities because their history is arguably the most erased and least taught. First, I do want to acknowledge that this history can be triggering. Content and video about neglect and abuse will be shared. It is okay to step away at any time if you need to. As you listen, think about histories you know of race, gender, class, and of Indigenous peoples. If you like, jot any connections down for the next discussion. This slide has 3 pictures of disability history covering from the 1660s to the 1980s. The first photo on the left shows adults and children living in horse stalls in the early poorhouses, which began in the US in 1660s. At the original poorhouses, anyone seen as needy or dangerous lived together, and they were forced to do harsh labor for free. Those unable to work were often chained or kept in cages. That harsh treatment often was for disabled people in poverty. In the 1800s, liberal reformers, often upper class white females, started to rally to divide poorhouses into 2 types of places. One was for the deserving poor, or for widowed women, children, and disabled people to be placed in charity-based homes. The other type was the undeserving poor. This time, the reformers wanted this group to be placed into prisons and work farms. The second photo on the top right is of an early training school, which grew popularity in the 1850s. These small private training schools were for the, quote, feeble-minded children of wealthy families. But after the Civil War and the collapsed economy, experts started advocating for warehousing a much wider net of people labeled as deficient into big institutions as a cost-saving measure. The third photo on the lower left, we see a sprawling institution. State governments began building large buildings like this to hold thousands of people from the 1880s till the 1980s, or for 100 years. People entered as children and often died there as adults. They were forced to do labor for free to keep these huge places in operation. The largest US institution in New York held over 13,000 people. The peak decades for institutionalization were in the 1930s and 40s. But first, let's touch on why some families felt forced to ask for institutional care of their disabled family members. Industrialization was a major reason institutions became useful for the families facing a new factory-based economy. Working class families asked the government to take in their disabled children and family members because they could no longer stay home and work together on the family farms. From the late 1800s to the 1940s, industrialized labor grew very quickly. This photo shows factory workers preparing peaches for canning at a Del Monte canning factory in the early 1940s. It's a very large factory warehouse filled with thousands of women in aprons packing fruit into boxes. Factories like this needed a cheap and steady supply of workers. The workers' bodies and minds needed to be predictable, conforming, and easily replaceable. That meant that factory owners did not want any people whose bodies and minds did not fit their standard system for an average worker. Let's go back to the 1900s when the intelligence test was first invented in France. Intelligence is a socially constructed idea that was and still is used to create a strict ordering of who's valuable in our society. A French scientist, Alfred Binet, developed the first intelligence test in 1905. He developed the test because the French government asked him to design a way to find and assist young learners who might need extra supports to learn. Here is a picture of Binet, who presents as a French white man with a bushy, long white beard, and he is wearing thin, wire-round glasses. Binet's rules for his intelligence tests were, number 1, the scores do not define anything permanent. Number 2, the scale is a rough guide for identifying and helping children. It is not a way of measuring children's worth. Number 3, low scores do not mean a child cannot learn. As you might know, the United States took Binet's test and used it in a way that broke all 3 of his rules. This slide shows Henry Goddard, a US scientist. He is a balding white man with a thick mustache and wire-rimmed glasses. Goddard translated Binet's test in 1908 into English, and then he sold it as Eugenics, a eugenics tool across the US. Eugenics is a fake or pseudoscience that rationalizes white supremacy. Eugenics argues for a world where the, quote, superior bodies and minds, unquote, keep control of everybody with, quote, inferior bodies and minds, unquote. I think you can imagine whom they wanted to control. Goddard was only one of many US scientists and institution superintendents who argued that the low test scores showed that the nation had a rising epidemic of feeble-mindedness. They pressured the government to prevent breeding among those with low scores and demanded the passing of forced sterilization laws and the building of more institutions to segregate people with low IQ scores from society. Eugenics turned out to be a very dangerous ideology for almost everyone. Basically, it gave those in power a reason to oppress anyone who was not a white, cisgendered, wealthy, college-educated, non-disabled man. The intelligence test was the way that measured people's value in society, and we still use it today. Eugenics flourished in the open popularity in the US until the 1950s. But what did eugenics mean for people with actual and perceived disabilities? For one, sterilization laws began in 1907 with Indiana, and soon other 33 states passed similar laws. These laws were active into the 1980s and mainly targeted women. Minnesota practiced sterilizations from 1925 to 1975. Buck versus Bell is the 1927 US Supreme Court ruling that forced sterilizations were permissible to do by the states. This slide shows Carrie Buck with her mother, Emma. Carrie is a white teenage girl with a round face and short, dark hair bob. Her mother is an older white woman with long gray hair pulled into a bun. Carrie gave birth to a child after she was raped by her foster father while her mother was in a state institution. While Carrie herself was in an overcrowded institution, the state asked that Carrie be sterilized against her will so she could be released as a cost-saving strategy. The Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. agreed. He wrote in the majority opinion his infamous words that, quote, 3 generations of imbeciles are enough, end quote. Carrie was forcibly sterilized. The Supreme Court has never overturned this 1927 decision. Rebecca, will you please cover the next slides?
Yes, thanks, Jenna. Hello, everyone. Rebecca speaking here. Now let's go to Germany for a moment and look at how U.S. eugenics influenced Nazi Germany. A warning that this might be a triggering topic for some of us, and it's about murder and genocide. This slide shows a Nazi poster of a blonde German man carrying 2 smaller men on a crossbar. The English translation is, "You are sharing the load. A genetically ill individual costs approximately 50,000 Reichsmarks by the age of 60 years, unquote. Nazi Germany called disabled people, quote, useless eaters, unquote, to create acceptance for its plan to kill them all. The first and last murdered victims of the Nazi regime were actually disabled children. Most people do not know that fact. Disabled people were both experimented upon and killed under Hitler's first sanctioned killing program. The program was called T4, named after the street address, Tiergartenstrasse 4, where Nazi bureaucrats told doctors and nurses whom to kill next. The Nazi regime later expanded the T4 project to kill other groups of people, which you know more about from the history books. Nazi doctors and nurses killed up to an estimated 800,000 people with disabilities, both children and adults, because they saw them as defective or undesirable. They used American eugenics as the basis of justification for mass murder and genocide. As we mentioned earlier, from the 1850s until the 1980s, the call for large institutions grew as eugenic beliefs were popularized and laws were passed. By the 1950s, psychotropic drugs were invented and given out in heavy doses in the institutions. The institutions faced state funding cuts, and they reduced staffing levels in response. Conditions became even more horrible for the people living there. Neglect, violence, and abuse were common. The slide here shows a picture from Life magazine of 7 disabled children, all probably around age 4 or 5, sitting in a single crib together. The caption says, "Children were warehoused at Willowbrook, left unattended on filthy wards." Now we are going to show you a 3-minute video of a TV news story from 1972 of Willowbrook. When they filmed there, 6,000 people were living in buildings meant for a maximum of 4,000. The video opens showing Robert Kennedy being interviewed about Willowbrook in the 1960s, and then it moves to the 1970s. Then you will see a TV reporter interviewing people who work at Willowbrook, such as doctors and nurses, and the film footage of the disabled people living in filth and often naked and malnourished. If you need to step away for 3 minutes, you can do so now. Remember, there were hundreds of similar places just like Willowbrook across the nation at this time in the 1970s, including multiple in Minnesota.
Well, I visited the State Institution for the Mentally Retarded, and I think particularly at Willowbrook that we have a situation that borders on a snake pit, and that the children live in filth, that many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower. There's very little future for the children or for those who are in these institutions. Both need a tremendous overhauling. I'm not saying that those who are the attendants there or the ones that run the institution are at fault. I think all of us are at fault. And I think it's just it's long overdue that something be done about it.
It's been more than 6 years since Robert Kennedy walked out of one of the wards here at Willowbrook and told newsmen of the horror he'd seen inside. He pleaded then for an overhaul of a system that allowed retarded children to live in a snake pit. But that was way back in 1965, and somehow we'd all forgotten. I first heard of this big place with the pretty sounding name because of a call I received from a member of the Willowbrook staff, a Dr. Michael Wilkins. The doctor told me he'd just been fired because he'd been urging parents with children in one of the buildings, building number 6, to organize so they could more effectively demand improved conditions for their children. The doctor invited me to see the conditions he was talking about, so unannounced and unexpected by the school administration, we toured building number 6. The doctor had warned me that it would be bad. It was horrible. There was one attendant for perhaps 50 severely and profoundly retarded children, lying on the floor naked and smeared with their own feces. They were making a pitiful sound, a kind of mournful wail that it's impossible for me to forget. This is what it looked like, this is what it sounded like, but how can I tell you about the way it smelled? It smelled of filth, it smelled of disease, and it smelled of death. We've just seen something that's probably the most horrible thing I've ever seen in my life. Is that typical of ward life?
Yes, there are 5,300 patients at Willowbrook, which is the largest institution for the mentally retarded in the world. The ones that we saw were the most severely and profoundly retarded. There are thousands there like that, not going to school, sitting on the ward all day, not being talked to by anyone.
Some of you maybe recognize the junior reporter, Geraldo Rivera, who became famous from this expose at Willowbrook on national TV. States held thousands of people here because of eugenic beliefs that made society think disabled people were less than human. After this news story, many families realized how awful these places were for their children, and they filed class action lawsuits to hold the states responsible for cruel and unusual punishment. Most families did not know how bad it was because the visiting rooms were separated from the living areas and kept very clean. As a result of lawsuits, the states began to shut down their large institutions in the 1980s and 1990s. We call that deinstitutionalization. But as we talk about in the upcoming February 23rd session, it was often a form of trans-institutionalization. Trans-institutionalization just means that disabled people were moved to smaller but similar places. What you just saw was very disturbing and sad. I get emotional. It breaks my heart every time I watch it. Sorry. Because I see my son in the children who are forced to exist at Willowbrook. It is exactly, sorry. It is exactly this history that makes me fight every day with allies and advocates to stop society from mistreating and institutionalizing people with disabilities. But do not worry, everyone. We will soon have another breakout to help us process this difficult history as a learning community. But as Amanda gets us ready for the breakout, this time for 5 to 6 people again, but for a shorter time of 7 minutes. I'd like to show a video of a Willowbrook survivor, Judy Moyseff, speaking about her life at Willowbrook. Judy was forced to live at Willowbrook for 8 years as a child. She was more fortunate than many children held there because her family visited her and took her home for holidays. Judy is shown in the video as a middle-aged person presenting as a white woman with light red hair. Judy is in an electronic wheelchair, and she also uses alternative communication device to speak. This clip is from 2013. So I want to emphasize here that her history is our history. It's recent history, and many state institution survivors are still alive today. I will now play Judy's 3-minute video.
There were no activities offered at Willowbrook, and the only time when we went outside was during the summer when it was too dangerously hot to stay in the building. We knew nothing about the community, and the community knew nothing of us. I sometimes wonder how I could have stayed there for 8 years. I think the conditions were so horrible that they crushed our spirits. Every day was exactly like the day before, and it did not matter if a month passed or a year. I had no dreams about my future, no plans for a grown-up life. The day that I left Willowbrook felt like the beginning of a new life. I was born again and I was free. It took me some time to adjust to living outside Willowbrook. I had to learn to set goals and fight for my rights. I wanted to forget about Willowbrook, but I couldn't. Staying there changed me forever. It shaped me into the person that I am today, and it also shaped the disability field. Indeed, a lot of progress has been made, but we have to continue to improve, especially in the current financial situation. It is so easy to slip back, and we don't deserve it.
Okay, thanks, Judy. All right. Let's take some time now to process in smaller groups for a short 7-minute breakout on the 300 plus years of history we just covered. We know it's not enough time, but we hope it's just enough to share your initial thoughts and reactions. The one question is, what did you learn about disability and ableism today that you will not forget? Explain why. Again, please appoint someone to report back in chat and turn on your cameras in breakout if you can. Again, ASL interpretation and live captioning will be in group 1. This time, choose to join a group of no more than 4 to 6 people if you can. Again, Amanda will start to assign you to rooms if you do not choose a room in the next minute or so, and you can ask for help if you need it. Make sure everyone has a chance to speak as well. Amanda, I think we're ready. All right. So we'd just like you to put in chat what your groups discussed. And I don't know if we'll have time to read them out, but I will ask you to put it in chat, and then Jana will summarize maybe, if she can. I'm going to challenge her to say in general what the chat is saying. We will provide a transcript of the chat, I believe, and a recording and an accessible handout for everyone on the Disability Equity website at the office, Minnesota State Office for Equity and Inclusion. Okay, Jana, do you see any chats you'd like to?
I do, and you do have a gray
Yep,
box.
I just realized that.
I think it was the breakout rooms.
It was.
So just the first one coming in, learning about Willowbrook will have a lasting impact. So we're learning about the connections between eugenics and the Holocaust. Also, chat's talking about the benefit of understanding history. As some, there's a lot of people relating to the experiences here, and just really understanding that things haven't changed. Some have, but how recent our history is, and how much some things just haven't changed.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Very insightful and important comments, and exactly what we hoped you would take away today. I think for me, if I can give you one big takeaway, is that disability often serves as the primary rationale or reason to oppress people across all the isms. And we'll talk about that more at the February 23rd session. This is the reason that ableism is so difficult to undo, because it carries a stigma that every one of us has been taught to fear. It somehow became normal in our society to mistreat and isolate disabled people or people perceived as disabled. The first step we all can take is to start seeing ableism, that it's happening every day all around us. Actions we can take. Learn more disability history and its intersections. Notice and set aside assumptions about disability. Slow down your shortcuts. Question why things are the way they are, who benefits, who's excluded. Learn directly from many people, many different people with disabilities, and challenge ableist systems in collaboration with disabled leaders. And join us for the 4 upcoming disability justice sessions. Here's a list of them. So February 23rd, we'll talk about racial justice and disability justice. March 30th, new ways to talk about disability. On April 27th, we'll highlight the voices of students at Minnesota State. And then May 4th, we're actually going to plan action from vision to action to create more inclusive classrooms, campuses, and communities. I'm at time, but I would like to close with a quote by Grace Lee Boggs. You cannot change any society unless you take responsibility for it, unless you see yourself as belonging to it and responsible for changing it. So thanks everybody for today. We have further resources which are in the accessible handout, which will be posted to the Minnesota State Office of Equity and Inclusion. And we thank you so much for coming today and learning with us. I hope that you will take what you learned today into your everyday life and take action with us. All right. Goodbye, everybody.